Hey everybody, today I want to do a little different thing. I want to just tell a quick story about one of the most sacred pedals of all time, the Centaur, and how I came into having the fifth one ever made when I bought that. So a quick little background, when I grew up playing in the 80s, I had two choices of pedals. One was the Boss Overdrive Distortion, and the other was a Tube Screamer TS10. This was the new version of the Tube Screamers that were replacing the TO, I think the 909s or something, TS9s. That's not a drum machine, right? And they were the standard pedal. Tube Screamers were the pedal. They had a great tone, they let it sustain and sing, great choices. So when I was in college in Boston, I was at Berkeley, and down the street there was a bunch of music stores, of course, around the school and stuff. And a great one was Bay State Vintage Guitars. The guy who owns it, Craig Jones, is a great guy. He used to repair amps, deal in vintage amps, and used guitars and stuff. He had a small shop down the street. So I went down there one day as I was trying to venture into my first tube amp. I wanted to get a real tube amp. I had come out of a PV Bandit 65. Woo! Yes, man. That's tone right there. That still works. I still got it. The thing is a tank. But I wanted the tube amp. Stevie Ray had just passed. So this was in the early 90s. And I wanted the tube amp. So I went to Bay State Vintage Guitars and I bought it. I bought a 1971 Fender Twin from him, silver-faced. And he ended up doing work on it and modifying it. We changed the speakers and we did a bunch of stuff. So I got to know Craig well, and I'd go over to his shop whenever he was working on stuff and poke around his store and play all these vintage guitars and stuff. It was really cool. I learned a lot about amps and equipment and that kind of stuff. So one day I was in there and I hear a guy come in the front. Craig was actually in the front of the store where the retail thing is. I was kind of in the back in the workshop. And I heard a guy come in saying he was trying to put a pedal on consignment. And I think Craig just asked him a couple of questions. And the guy said, well, let me plug it in and listen to it. So he proceeded to pull the pedal out of this messenger bag. He grabbed an SG off the wall and happened to plug into a Fender Twin similar to mine. The pedal, I gotta admit, was pretty ugly looking. I thought it was a vintage pedal he was redoing or something. I didn't know what it was. He plugged it in, and in 3 notes, what is that pedal? What is that? It was the tone I was looking for. It was amazing. Clear, but sustaining, but distortion, overdrive, but clarity and definition, and it was incredible. So what he pulled up was this pedal. This is the grail, holy grail of all pedals, the Centaur, as it's now deemed, the golden horsey pedals. So this was the pedal, and I remember thinking it was just so big and ugly and just not like, I was like, what is this thing? And he's like, well, I made it. I was like, you made that pedal? He's like, yeah, I'm from MIT, and my buddy and I spent 4 years developing and making this pedal. Now, of course, this ended up being Bill Finnegan. He was in there with his first run of pedals he was trying to get out there. So at Bay State Vintage Guitars, Craig was like, you know what, I think he was asking a little over $200 for the pedal, which at the time was crazy high. The Tube Screamers, I think, were probably 50 or 70 bucks or something. So it was really high for an overdrive pedal. So Craig was like, no, I don't think I don't think it'll work for the store here. But I said, hey man, I would love to talk to you more. Do you have a phone number or something? He's like, sure, man. He's like, I'll come over to your house and we'll try it through your gear. I was like, man, dude, what a guy. This is awesome. So within, whatever, must have been a couple of days or something, he came over. We had a band house out in Medford, Mass. My band was Schleho. We toured a bunch, and we were just about to record our new album. So I was very psyched to get a new overdrive right before we went in to record our first of 5 albums. This is probably now 1994, 95 that this was happening. And he came over to the house for 3 hours. Bill was the coolest guy. We were in our rehearsal space. I had that Strat with some Joe Barden pickups in it that I was mostly using, but I was also changing over to that 175, the Gibson. That's a 1981 175. And he said, you know, he had built the pedal with a Les Paul, a gold top Les Paul, so it was really meant for humbuckers, and he thought it would really shine with the 175. And I'm thinking, you know, you don't put distortion on that. I'm playing kind of more jazz stuff with it. But he was right. That thing screams with the Centaur, and that's what I used with Schleho for over almost a decade when we toured exclusively. So he went through the pedal. He showed me all the stuff, and I can show you here. The famous thing on the back for the Centaurs is that he dipped it all in wax. And you can also see, I think, right there, 005, right? It's the 5th one he made. And I asked him about that wax. He opened it up and he showed me all the parts. He said they were all top grade components. He was really adamant about the tone control. He's like, we spent so much time, and they were calling it treble, which I thought was interesting. It was like a treble boost, but he was trying to explain to me how it's not the same as a tone control and a tube screamer. And my only existence was a tube screamer, and it had the 3 same settings, just basically a volume, a tone, and an output. But this is such a different breed of a pedal. So he told me that this stuff was for protecting the circuits, for weather, for movement and corrosion. I'm definitely sure it had something to do with people not spying on his work on the board, which I know later people took blow dryers and melted off that stuff to get the reverse engineer the schematics from it to create the whole clone wars. The Klon Centaur clones, man, they're everywhere. So he came over for 3 hours. I love the pedal. It works with my gear. He showed me how naturally it cleans up when you play softer. It was very dynamic, much more than the other ones, which were just kind of on or off. If I played quieter, it cleaned up. If I bit into it, it was very reactive to my playing, and I loved that idea. It was very much a reflection of me at that moment when I'm playing. And how clear it stayed with double stops. I was into a lot of hybrid picking, so I was into Danny Gatton and stuff. And I wanted a lot of clarity with bass notes playing with chords on top. And the pedal was phenomenal and had headroom to absolutely blow an amplifier up. I never saw or have seen such a powerful pedal as that one. So for the next bunch of years, I toured exclusively with that pedal. He told me that it's much more preferred to use the battery and not an external jack. In fact, he didn't even provide one, and it only came with one of these style jacks. So I had to actually, he was like, oh, go to Switchcraft, order this, order that, solder it together, make your adapter. And I was like, oh, geez, man, that's kind of a pain in the butt. But I just used 9-volt batteries. It was actually great. I had one pedal, that was that 175 through my Centaur into my Twin, and that was my tone for the first 4 or 5 albums with Schlejo. We toured a decade playing well over 1,000 shows, labeled with the Allman Brothers and stuff. It was crazy. We did so much stuff with it. But when Bill sold me the pedal, it was $219. They get the receipt and stuff. And he gave me some business cards. And he's like, you know, if you're out on the road, hand these out. I was like, of course, man. I love your pedal. I would love it. So I handed those out immediately. Every show, people are like, what is that pedal? Dude, the tone, I love it. I know. I was like, check this thing out, check it out, check it out. So every time I would bump into him, he'd hand me another group of cards. So about 3 years later, some guy sound guy was moving one of the heavy mic stands, and he was carrying it across the stage, and the bottom disc fell off and right on top of the pedal, and it crushed my tone knob and it pushed the pot in. So I said, Bill, I need to repair this, man. Can I come by and check it out? And he's like, yeah, man, bring it to a music store outside of Porter Square. We'll arrange for it. That was outside of Boston. And by the way, he told me he put these these knobs so far apart because he wanted it to control with your foot. He wanted the drive, and so you could look down with your foot and rub it alongside of the knob. I thought that was so brilliant because I constantly wanted different levels of distortion and gain. Sometimes you want to boost on your solo. I can just go down with my foot and just notch it up a little bit, and it was gone. So I had to go back and get this pot repaired. So when I met him in the store, he was just sitting there talking to the guys. He's like, come on, let's go in the back. And we went to the back counter, and he pulled out the pot and he got it off the board, and he's just talking to me about stuff, and he just bites it closed. And I was like, oh my God, dude, what are you doing? You're gonna break your tooth. He's like, no, that's how you fix it. You gotta close it back up. It basically had just pushed the pot through itself, if you know a potentiometer. It just came out of the bottom a bit. So he scrunched it all back together. I don't know if there's still his teeth marks on there or not. It's pretty funny. But he closed it all back up, and I was like, so man, this was probably like 3 years after I bought it. So like, how are sales, man? And I forgot to say, actually, when I bought the first one, he had a messenger bag with a couple in there. And I was like, do you happen to have the first one? And he's like, no, I put the first one aside for a special reason, which we later found out he was going to use as a future build to raise money for some family who was having issues. And he constantly, I think, had over the years put models aside to raise money for someone in his family. And I asked him, I said, well, what's the lowest serial number you have? And he's like, well, I made 8 pedals first. This one here is number 5. That's the lowest one I have right now. And I was like, I'll take it. He said he had sold the first 3 to friends in the neighborhood. And I actually saw a guy very close to the store we were at playing it one night. And on the floor, he had his Centaur. And I was like, oh, another Centaur guy, the first one I saw. So he must have been one of the first couple. So when I saw Bill a few years later doing that repair, I asked him, I was like, how are sales going? He's like, man, I'm going crazy, man. He's like, I'm on 3,000 something. I was like, what? You sold 3,000 of these pedals already? He's like, yeah, man, I can't keep up with it. I can't keep up. My whole apartment is filled with these things. And I just couldn't believe it. So soon thereafter, we were watching, the band was on tour, and we were watching a Metallica documentary, I think Head of the Monster or something, and Kirk Hammett's in front of his board, and sure enough, there's the Centaur. And I'm yelling at the guys in the other row, guys, the Centaur, man, Kirk Hammett's got a Centaur. Oh my God, look at that, oh, yeah. So it was like, you know, I felt famous, it was so cool, that's my pedal. But then over the years, this pedal just became what it became. You guys all know the lore, the folklore of this pedal. I could not understand what was happening around this pedal over the years watching this stuff. Now, remember, when I bought this in '95, the internet didn't really, I mean, it existed, but it wasn't like it is. So I didn't even own a computer until 1999. So I didn't know what was growing with the lure and the appeal of this pedal. So finally, one of the last Schleho gigs I did with this, we were playing at a bar or music venue out in, I think, Jamestown, New York or something, and a couple guys were hovering around my pedal board. And I go up on stage to do something, and they're like, dude, you got a golden horsey. And that was the first time I heard the term referred to that. I knew that he had made the gold ones, I knew he made the silver ones, and then the logos were on some of them or not, and then he stopped making them. And I was like, yeah, why? And he's like, well, man, they're on eBay now for like $3,000. I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, and those are the low serial numbers, like 300s. And I was like, oh, really? So of course I didn't say that I had number 5 on the board. So that was the last gig I brought it out to. I was terrified. I didn't realize how much it was valued at in the guitar community. But apparently, Josh Scott there from JHS just valued his number 2 at $500,000. So I'll take somewhere in there if we can. If you guys want to have a deal, let me know some numbers. Maybe we can talk about this pedal. For the last bunch of years, it's basically just been sitting here looking proud. I do some recording here with it when I'm at home, but I never bring it out of the house, despite my bandmates and fans and stuff want me to bring the Centaur. It's a great pedal. I love this thing. So yeah, man, this is the Centaur number 5. So much was built around this pedal. I can't even explain how much I've seen it and how much, as you can see, it was I played this everywhere and anywhere. This was been through everywhere, and you can even see some of that's actually fake blood, but some blood on there from one of the Halloween gigs we did. It was my main pedal. I didn't really think of what it was, you know. And then when he came out with the KTR pedals, I was like, great, I can get a replacement. But then he even on the outside of it, I don't know why he put the writing on there about the whole, and I was like, I'm gonna retire this awesome pedal from my live touring rig. So that's it. That's the Centaur number 5. It's a mystical pedal. It's been a absolute staple of my sound. All 5 of the Schleho albums I did with it, live I did with it. We recorded with Derek Trucks and stuff, and all that was there. And it's such an awesome pedal. So enjoy the folklore out there, the holy grail. So this was, again, as the title says, the story of the Centaur. I didn't plan to do a shootout or anything like that. There's enough billions of those things online as it is. And it's great. I love it. My Centaur. Woo! Rock on, guys.